Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And I was just thinking about this is the day after the eclipse, and a very appropriate day for a important webinar about how the work that we can do to frankly help save the planet. Thanks to so many people that have been involved in making this happen. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about the session today, but I want to provide a little bit of background about what's next. On May 14th, we have another webinar on the docket, and you will receive notice about it. And it is going to focus on Philanos and collective giving and women's leadership and recent trends. Particularly, two areas we're going to cover. One is just a quick overview of our organization. We're growing significantly, and we have some new board members. We'll share that information. By the way, thank you for voting for the new board slate and voting on our governance committee members. In that session on May 14th, we will be joined by Ilyasa Shabazz of Philanthropy Together, who will provide highlights of a very important partnership with the Johnson Center and Comina Consulting to survey collective giving groups in the U.S. She will discuss the highlights from a new, very powerful report, if you haven't gotten into it yet, of particular interest in this new data that captures the deep roots that collective giving has in communities of color and marginalized communities. This report will help all of us to continue the narrative around who is recognized as a philanthropist and what actions count as philanthropy. Expect to hear more in May and beyond, and be sure to register for the May 14th webinar. As a reminder, invite your colleagues and networks to join us as well to the webinar. Remember, your yearly Philanos membership provides all your members access to enjoy all Philanos benefits. I'd like to make one other sort of personal note before I turn it over to our moderator. I happen to be at a special gathering with somebody you're going to hear shortly, who will talk about the importance and power of our involvement in saving the planet. I was at a gathering with Jane Fonda, and many of us know her from her screen and television activity, but this is a very serious woman working on very serious issues. And it was a treat to see her and her team and her recognize not only her passion, but her real understanding of what the issues are. So now let me introduce today's webinar coordinator and moderator, Michelle Hines of 99 Girlfriends in Portland. Congrats to Michelle, who will be serving as a new board member. And I've had the pleasure of collaborating for the Baltimore Conference Program Committee. Michelle, let's go. We're eager to learn how our circles can help save the planet within our own communities.
Thanks so much, Sandy. It's such an honor to be here with you all today. And as Sandy said, thank you so much to everyone who has helped us pull together this powerful hour, including my new colleague, Shreya, who has had a long and distinguished career at the Union of Concerned Scientists and now at Rachel's Network. And we're going to hear a lot more about that. In addition to her distinguished career and the opportunity that we've had to work together over the last few months, Shreya and I recently learned that we grew up just a few miles apart, even though we live all the way across the country from each other now. So I really look forward to all the information that Shreya is going to share with us. And as I said, she's from Rachel's Network, one of Philanos's partners. And Rachel's Network is named for a woman scientist who helped spur the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, among her many accomplishments. And Rachel's network is a philanthropic community of women who are committed to a safer, healthier, and more just world for all. And as Sandy said, we do have the opportunity to hear from another powerful woman at the beginning of this webinar, Jane Fonda. And so, Dale, I'm going to ask you to roll the video. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, Philanos members. I wish I could be with you today, but I'm in California trying to stop big oil from overturning a law that protects communities from toxic oil pollution. The more and more I travel around the country, from the Gulf Coast to Commerce City in Colorado, I'm seeing firsthand the harmful effects of fossil fuel pollution on people's health. Make no mistake, the climate crisis is a health crisis. People are getting sick. Increased rates of asthma and cancer, reproductive harm, and more. In 2022, I started the Jane Fonda Climate PAC to elect climate champions to stop the stranglehold that the fossil fuel industry has over politics. Many of the climate champions that we're working to elect are women. Many of them are women of color. You know, when women get together, we can accomplish anything. And nowhere is this more urgently required than in addressing the climate crisis. That's why I'm dedicating my life to fighting this crisis. If you haven't gotten involved in the climate fight yet, attending this webinar is a great first step in changing that. Thank you, Philanos, and to each and every one of you for helping make the world a better place. Together, we can make a real difference in this fight. Together is the important word. We can't really do much as individuals. It's when we unite to fight this that we can really make a difference. That's why the powers that be don't want us to get together. They're trying to render us a society of individuals. They don't get it. Well, they do get it. And don't let anybody tell you that when we unite together, we can't make a difference. That's what makes a difference. That's what changes things. Thank you.
Shreya, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Philanos for having me here, and thank you to Jane Fonda. To be on a webinar with Jane Fonda, I think I can cross that off my bucket list. That was very exciting. Hi, everyone. I'm Shreya Durvasula. I'm the Catalyst Award Director from Rachel's Network. A little bit about me. I was born in India, raised in Singapore, and then grew up just down the street from Michelle in New Jersey. And I was a chemistry major, but knew pretty early on that I wanted to work with people and not molecules. I got my start in public health with the American Academy of Pediatrics, which really helped me understand the systemic and intersecting nature of so many of the issues that we care about: climate change, healthy democracy, water protection, clean air, and reproductive rights. And I really feel lucky that I'm able to bring that systems approach to the work that I do at Rachel's Network. So, climate change, major concern, an existential crisis. It's real, it's happening now, and we need to do a lot of things about it. And some other environmental concerns beyond just a warming planet. I mean, we're seeing an increase in toxins and plastic, environmental racism and injustices, poor air quality, extreme heat, lack of access to clean water, unsustainable agriculture. All of these environmental concerns often impact low-income immigrant communities of color way more than their wealthy and white counterparts. So they're really dealing with the burden of this. I also want to take a moment to give credit to the incredible artist Sophie Sarkar, who did the illustrations you're seeing on your slide today. So, the 2 decades, we've seen a rise in climate-focused philanthropy. The realization that our planet's just getting worse by the day has really inspired donations and giving to specifically address climate change. A recent survey revealed that 85% of US foundation funders ranked climate change as a top 3 concern of theirs, but only a third are even taking steps to do anything about it. And this is just like considering funding climate, not actually committing to putting real money behind it. A report from the ClimateWorks Foundation shares that in 2022, philanthropic funding to climate change mitigation experienced a slow, even as overall the field of funding was increasing. 3 areas of environmental philanthropy where funding is currently growing. So we have the built environment. Funding is growing about 20%, especially over the last few years. Corporate accountability. Funding has steadily increased with a particularly large percentage. So we're seeing 130% increase to this particular area. And I think, you even saw it in Jane's video where a lot of states are trying to fight big oil and taking fossil fuel polluters to court. And then minerals for energy transition has also been a area of interest to funders, especially as we're seeing the clean energy transition, which is creating demand for minerals for electric vehicles and solar panels and things like that. So you have these areas that are growing, but that's not always reflected by the impacts and what the communities need on the ground. And then also in the US, 80% of climate philanthropy goes to NGOs led by men, and 90% of climate philanthropy goes to organizations led by white people. In fact, only 0.5% of foundation funding goes to organizations that are targeted to and for women and girls of color. Not only that, the grants to these organizations, the median grant amount is way less than grants that are going to organizations for and by white people. And then the issue is that the giving is also not evenly distributed across the geographic regions, and it doesn't reflect the distribution of women and girls of color in the US. So the South in particular, as a region, receives less funding per woman or girl of color than any other region. So we know that the impacts of environmental challenges, pollution, extreme heat, lack of access to clean air and water are disproportionately faced by these communities of color. But the disconnect between who is dealing with these burdens and who's actually getting the funding and resources to tackle these challenges is the problem that we're going to be talking about today. And I think it's, as a philanthropic community, one that we need to all collectively address.
Thanks so much for that great overview, Shreya. And we already have some folks asking for links to the report so that we can dig in further. A little bit of housekeeping before I ask you to tell us a little bit. Please, we're going to use the chat for some interaction, including right now. And if you do have questions for Shreya or for any of the rest of us, please put them in the Q&A, because we do have folks monitoring the Q&A, and we will answer as many of those questions as we can. Thanks. So first, some questions for you. We'd love to know what surprises you about these findings, if anything. If you're observing signs of change in your own community, like are there either positive or negative changes around attention to the environment and environmental funding that you want to share? And is there anything that your giving circle is doing to change the kinds of statistics and disparities that Shreya is sharing? So we're just going to give 2 or 3 minutes to take a look at your perspective. Thanks, Deborah, for posting that link. Don't everybody chime in at once. I'll share. Okay, maybe one question at a time. So could you share in the chat, is there anything that surprises you about these findings?
I'll offer something to get us started. I'm sadly not surprised by these findings. It was really helpful to see the data as I was pulling together information for this presentation. I mean, it's right there in black and white, all these numbers, and it was really disheartening to see, but also not surprising.
Great, thank you so much for getting us started. And Sandy's sharing that Denver is funding nonprofits that operate in neighborhoods that have been identified as having serious environmental challenges. So shifting the lens on geography. Anybody else? I'm going to talk about 99 Girlfriends, my own giving circle, a little bit later, but one of the things that we've done is actually change how we define our environmental giving. A little bit of surprise, a little bit of the ways in which people's personal experience with the water quality in their community is changing how they think about this. Please continue to share if you have thoughts. I think, Shreya, let's move on. Thanks.
Absolutely. So most of you are probably familiar with the tenets of trust-based philanthropy. This is just a little reminder as we delve into the rest of the webinar. Trust-based philanthropy is an approach to giving that addresses the inherent power imbalances between funders, nonprofits, and the communities they serve. And at its core, it's really about redistributing power systemically, organizationally, interpersonally. And this is in service of a healthier, more equitable nonprofit ecosystem, which is something I think we are all striving for. And on a practical level, this looks like multi-year unrestricted giving, streamlined applications and reporting, commitment to building relationships on mutual respect, transparency, and trust, and also embracing learning. And you'll see some of these different elements during and how they were embraced during the formation and evolution of the Catalyst Award. As Michelle mentioned, Rachel's Network is a community of women philanthropists who are dedicated to women's leadership and environmental protection. We were founded almost 25 years ago, named after Rachel Carson, another personal hero of mine. And racial and environmental justice have been really a core part of the work here at Rachel's Network. I do not expect you to read all of this slide. There's a lot here, don't even try. This is just to kind of show you everything that went into the formation of the award. So to recap, not only are women of color unjustly denied access to philanthropic dollars, but they're also facing a higher risk of burnout, negatively impacting our collective ability to make the change that we need to address these environmental challenges. So a few years ago, Rachel's Network launched Vision 2020, which was our strategic plan, which set goals towards supporting women leaders, mobilizing our members, and diversifying our network. At the same time, Green 2.0 launched its first report, The State of Diversity in Environmental Organizations. If you're familiar with Green 2.0, I know they're fabulous. If you're not, I'd highly encourage checking them out after the webinar as well. So they provided a stark data-driven look at the lack of diversity and representation in mainstream environmental organizations and how that's really undermined efforts to make lasting environmental impact. So then we took that report, we took a bunch of these, the early version of Pocket Change, and created a working group of advisors, members, women of color leaders in the environmental movement, and brought them together to figure out how we could have the most impact. If you're familiar with Adrienne Marie Brown, you know, she's an activist, writer, and scholar. If you're not, definitely run, don't walk to your nearest independent bookstore and check out Emergent Strategy. In her book, Adrienne Marie Brown talks about this concept. So you have this circle of like, what breaks your heart most about the world? What are you motivated by? What do you want to change? You know, what is your vision for a better world? And this other circle of your unique talents, skills, and gifts. So what are your resources? What, you know, what's your expertise? What are you able to bring to the table to share? And the overlap, that Venn diagram piece, where you are now being called to service. So what do you care about? What can you offer? Where they overlap is, you know, where you should be at for sort of maximum impact. And I like to think that you know, folks at Rachel's Network took that into consideration when we launched the Rachel's Network Catalyst Award. The Catalyst Award celebrates women of color who are building a safer, healthier, and more just world. It provides monetary prizes, leadership and networking support, and public recognition. And as far as I know, it's still the only program that's really targeted at mid-career women environmentalists of color. It's really aligned with our Rachel's Network mission, and we fund all sorts of environmental approaches and issues, as you'll see. And the thing that I've noticed even in my short few months as a tenure here at Rachel's Network is that the award is really rooted in care and celebration, starting with the application and nomination process, all the way to the community that emerges afterwards. It's really beautiful. So what is the award? So we totaling $75,000 per recipient. The Catalyst Award gives essentially $25,000 a year for 3 years to these women. That includes this $10,000 unrestricted prize, $5,000 for leadership and well-being stipends, and then this $10,000 for general support for the awardee organization. You may be wondering why we carved out that like $5,000 leadership and well-being stipend. Well, we found that awardees were sometimes hesitant to set that money aside for themselves. Maybe it was because of imposter syndrome, or maybe they just wanted to funnel every single dollar they had back into their organization, but they were not always using that money for like leadership and well-being. And so even though it is unrestricted money, we gently encourage them and help them carve out that space and almost like give themselves permission to use that funding for well-being stipends, to take a break, to get a massage, to go to a professional development class they've been wanting to go to forever. So this really separates that out. And then we also have some monetary prizes for the finalists as well in recognition of their leadership. But again, in embracing the tenets of trust-based philanthropy, more than just the money, Catalyst awardees are connected both to the Rachel's Network community, which you've heard. So we have connections to other funders and foundations and other funding opportunities. And then we also connect them to each other. Now this growing, vibrant network of former awardees. We share fellowship and grant opportunities with this group. We've also been contracted with Imagine Us, which is a community of consultants and coaches who all support leaders of color working in the racial and social justice spaces. And many of our awardees do take us up on that career coaching and consultation. So again, we're trying to find opportunities beyond just writing the check to support these leaders in the community. A little bit about who our awardees are. They take many different approaches to environmental work. So it could be policy change, could be scientific research, community organizing. They also work on a lot of different kinds of issues: water protection, regenerative food practices, fighting fossil fuel infrastructure, protecting our oceans, establishing just and regenerative food systems, empowering BIPOC leaders and advocates. So we really try to, the depth and breadth of the work that these women do is incredible. And I'd highly encourage you all check out the 5-year impact report that we put out at the end of last year. There's profiles on all these incredible women, and you can see all the different regions that they're working on, the different approaches that they've been taking. To go in depth a little bit more, some wonderful highlights from recent awardees. So Jackie Patterson is the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project, which is a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice activists. Jackie was just awarded Time Magazine's Woman of the Year for 2024. So it's incredible. So again, these women are just on the cusp of like stardom, essentially. Colette Pichon Battle is a co-founder for Taproot Earth. She was the lead architect of the Gulf South for a Green New Deal. So it's a regional network of 360 organizations in the Gulf South calling for a green economy. The year after she received the Catalyst Award, Colette actually won the 2023 Heinz Award, which recognizes outstanding individuals for their innovative contributions to the environment. And then we have Anel Hernandez, who is now the Director of Climate and Environmental Policy for the New York City City Council. She made this transition during her coaching journey, which Rachel's Network helped subsidize. So when we first met her through the award process, she had just helped pass this monumental Climate Leadership and Protection Act and wanted to work on it more. And with our help, she was able to do just that. So I share these examples, not to say that, these women are continuing to accomplish such incredible work in this country and on fighting environmental injustice. I like to think that our support of them gave them a little bit more space, reduced maybe a few barriers for them to be able to achieve the goals that they set out to. Another impact for both the awardees and Rachel's network has been an increase in visibility in the media. So the award announcement always garners a engagement for us. But more importantly, the awardees have then again gone on to be featured in press and media. They're usually speakers for programming, either facilitated by Rachel's network or partners of ours. And they've gone on to receive, as I mentioned, other accolades and acclaim. I will give you all just a few moments. I invite you to take a second to read this quote from Daphne Sanchez, a 2021 awardee. So whether it's through the application or nomination process or connecting with leaders through the programming, it's been a great way to build the reach of Rachel's network as well. What I appreciated about the Catalyst Award process is that we were able to engage environmental leaders from all these different places. So we have this nationwide reach while still supporting place-based work and interventions, which I know is of interest to Giving Circles here. And then it's also been a really wonderful learning, growth, and opportunity for Rachel's network members. It's informed our JEDI work, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and it's helped expand approaches to giving for our members. Often members who volunteer as reviewers for the award have also used the experience to learn about a wide variety of environmental issues and the work that's happening on the ground. Often members find out about work that's happening in their own backyard that they didn't even know about. So it's really connected our members to some of the frontline communities and the work that they've been doing. And so again, it's a nice, easy way. I think we've been trying to help facilitate connections between funders and the Catalyst community. And that's reflected here in the shift over the last 10 years within our network on member giving. So you've really seen this sort of values alignment of us connecting to BIPOC-led organizations, giving now fully to either organizations that are led either by women or non-binary people, shifting from a national perspective to supporting local and more regional organizations and work happening on the ground. And our members tell us that investing in this award helps them both achieve their philanthropic goals, but makes it easy for them to live into their values by funding this work, either through funding the award itself or the women directly. And really, if there's only one thing you're going to take away from the presentation today, it's to ensure that your funding is rooted in what impacted communities actually need and is values aligned. What we're seeing now is sort of an alarming number of foundations falling into this kind of dangerous trap of ensnaring, and they're ensnaring racial justice organizations in the process. Essentially, after the racial reckoning of 2020, a lot of foundations and funders did rise to the occasion and shifted their approach of funding, shifting who they were funding, where they were funding. And now we're starting to see them revert back to pre-2020 work of parceling out smaller grants, protecting their endowments, having really extensive application and reporting requirements, which can be really burdensome for small community organizations. So this is truly not the moment to back away, but to double down on funding justice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shreya. I love where you ended your talk, that this is not the moment to back away, but instead to double down. And just throughout your presentation, I was really so wowed by the way that the award began and has evolved, really expresses the tenets of trust-based philanthropy that a lot of our affiliates have stepped into practice. And the way that it combines data, learning, and the deep care. We did have one question that came up that I want to ask you to comment on before we move on, and that is how affiliates, our local giving collectives, might connect with some of the work that your awardees are doing, because certainly we have affiliates in a lot of the places that you've mentioned.
That's a great question. Thank you. I swear I didn't even plant it. I think after this webinar, I'll share the link to the impact report so you can see of the awardees who's already doing work. And that also has a list of finalists as well and their organizations and where they're located. So you'll be able to either look at the map and see where folks are located. You can also always reach out to me. The end of the webinar, we'll be sharing a slide with my email address. So if you want me to put you in touch directly with folks, I'm also happy to help build those relationships or share other work that's happening in whatever region you are from and want to learn more about. Oh, Jamie, thank you for putting the report in the chat. Appreciate you.
That's great. Yeah, thanks everybody for chiming in and helping out to share those resources. I am going to take just a minute to talk about my Giving Collective as an example of another kind of investment and evolution over time. And I hope that this might raise some other questions for you, might inspire you to think about how your own Giving Collective is investing in the environment. So 99 Girlfriends is a regional women's giving collective. We're in Portland, Oregon, and the surrounding counties. We're founded in 2016, so this is our 8th year of giving. We're at about 300 members now. We've been as big as 500 and as small as 117. Over time, we've given a little over $3 million to our region. And you can see the environmental giving is a share of that over time, $395,000. We were founded in 2016, but we did not give our first big grant to an environmental organization for 3 years. And 2019 is the year that we reached 500 women, and we were still following the traditional Impact 100 model. So we were able to give a $100,000 grant in each of our 5 focus areas that year. Our members loved that because the folks who were really passionate about the environment and the folks who were really passionate about the arts had not seen us give a big grant in either of those areas yet. And so in part because of our members' feedback, we let go of giving in $100,000 increments and instead shifted to giving a significant grant in each of our 5 focus areas each year. We just divided up however much money we had into 5 parts. This year, we launched a new strategic plan and we narrowed and refined our focus areas. So we're only giving in 4 areas, each of which has a strong equity emphasis. And one of those is still focused on the environment. This is a map of how we've given through 2022. So it doesn't quite express all of the $3 million that I mentioned earlier. But you can see in the left-hand corner, the green environment and sustainability piece. This is the $395,000 and the grants that we've given over time. And they're quite diverse. If you just even look at the titles of the organizations, Trash for Peace, which is really focused on recycling, Wisdom of the Elders, which is an Indigenous-led organization. The Community Energy Project, which helps lower income households manage the effects of climate change and does energy efficiency upgrades in low income households. And then I'm going to speak about just one grant that we've given that I think is emblematic of our equity focus now, which is wild diversity. Now, I live in a place, the Pacific Northwest, where people like to get outdoors. And we have a relatively small percentage of our population, at least, in this, in the region where we give, that is people of color. And people of color often feel less welcome on our trails near our watersheds than than the rest of us. And so while diversity really focuses on helping BIPOC and LGBTQ folks feel more comfortable, joyful, welcome in the beautiful outdoor spaces that are emblematic of our home. They really like build leadership among these communities that's really focused on and rooted in that outdoors. And this is just, I mean, there's a lot of words on a slide, but this is the way that we are focusing our environmental grant making now. And this is new, so we haven't given a grant with this particular lens yet, but our focus now is on ensuring everyone has equal access to resources and safe spaces, healthy food, home environments, water and green space. Which is why I sort of pulled up the wild diversity example. Countering environmental burdens, which we've heard quite a bit about already today. Advancing participation in the green workforce, right? If we're going to have greener communities, then we need folks to help us make that happen. And a particular emphasis on systems change that includes everyone in decision-making processes. So that's just a quick overview, and you may see yourself reflected there. We are going to take your questions now. If you have questions, and as Shreya mentioned, you can reach out to her directly, you can reach out to me directly, and we would love to hear from you. So let's take a look at what questions and comments you have. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so maybe I'll ask one myself. Shreya, can you tell us a little more about the way that the Catalyst Award has changed and why over the time that you've given that award?
Absolutely. So the first year of the Catalyst Award, it was just a one-time grant of $10,000. So the biggest shift has been both the making it $25,000 and making a multi-year gift. And I mean, both of those came directly from feedback from awardees to say, like, you know, when we ask them what are ways that we can support you, well, it is so nice to be able to have guaranteed funding for a couple of years in a row, so that it really helps take the pressure off of, especially again, smaller organizations from having to do continuous fundraising every single year, right? And they still have to do a little bit of that, but knowing that they have this multi-year gift coming from us has been helpful. And then of course the award amount itself. I mean, in order to be really catalytic, I would love to even give more to money to folks. This year, the application process just closed a few weeks ago, and we got almost 200 applications, which is almost double of last year's. So there's a real need. I mean, and we're looking, you know, still with the restrictions of women of color in the US, we're still seeing this, like, just like I said, such a need in the community. And so would love to be able to give more to these women and give more awards if possible. But I think that those two shifts in particular have come directly from the feedback of former awardees. And then a third one, which I think has always been sort of built into the origin of the award, the idea of going beyond the check, but then we've been able to expand it out the last few years by really having more concrete offerings for the Catalyst community, whether it's webinars, connecting them to those coaches, finding other opportunities for them to serve on boards, act as speakers. And again, as the award is growing and the network is growing, hopefully those opportunities will continue to grow as well. So it's really thinking about more than just writing a check and then kind of walking away. How do we continue to build a deeper, more meaningful relationship with our grantees?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it occurs to me that one of the ways that Philanos affiliates might partner with your awardees or with you is that there might be speaking or like expert contributor opportunities for folks who overlap geographically with our community. I was going to ask you something else, but now I forgot. One of the other questions that came up, and I think this is a question for the 24 of us who are on this webinar right now, is what might get in the way of affiliates giving an environmental grant at all, or investing bigger amounts in environmental giving. So I'd love to hear from any of you in the chat. I mean, I've shared our own experience of like, it's not what people voted for in our first couple years. And so until we got bigger, we didn't give, and we didn't give significantly in that area. So what's been other people's experience?
I can also kick us off because I have thoughts on this. Obviously, we're not, yeah. One thing is, I think the idea of tackling environmental change can feel so huge and sort of insurmountable, like people not knowing where to start, or feeling like, especially now with the IRA and the funding coming from the Biden administration, that there's already sort of a lot of money in the climate space. Yes, and as Kathleen was saying, that's exactly right. The sense of the problem being too big. And so I think, again, finding that sweet spot of going back to that Adrienne Marie Brown slide of like, yes, this is a big problem, but is there anything in particular that's really moving you, whether it's access to clean water or toxics or extreme heat, and then where you feel like you have expertise in your community or resources that you can bring to bear, and then finding that can help tackle this big intersecting systemic problem to more bite-sized challenges that you can take on. And then the other thing is, we also had to really expand what we meant by the environment. So beyond just climate change, one of the awardees from a few years ago, Briante McCorkle, runs the Conservation League of the League of Conservation Voters in Georgia. And some of our members weren't quite sure why we were also funding things like a healthy democracy and, doing and voter outreach, and really the connection between better environmental outcomes and a stronger, healthier democracy has been proven. So there's a very clear link. And so you could even think about some democracy work as potential climate or environmental work. So it is much broader than people realize. And maybe folks can sometimes have like a narrow view of what environmental funding is, and that prevents them from necessarily from giving.
Yes, I know. I listened to a webinar from last year that Rachel's network did with the leader of the Washington Women's Foundation, Maria Colby Wolf, and I was really interested in the way that Maria talked about the impact that the environment has on human beings, right? That when we think about this more in the sense of like a kind of human-centered design, and the impact that various environmental aspects have on all of us every day, that it sometimes broadens our view. Any other thoughts about what the barriers might be for those of us who are giving locally or regionally, who are giving maybe in smaller chunks than $75,000 at a time? Sandy is also suggesting that be great to have like a list of environmental grants from all of the affiliates who are doing this kind of funding. And I think sometimes when we see what each of us is doing, it sometimes inspires our own thinking. And Deborah, thanks for your comment that we may not all live in places that have an abundance of organizations who are actually working on these issues in a way that has impact. Other questions, comments, things you would love to know more about? We've got 10 minutes maybe, so good amount of time if someone wants to ask a question or chime in. And Nancy, while folks are thinking about that, I wonder if you would put in the chat your suggestion for following up on Sandy's idea that we might build a list. I know we did a little bit of outreach in advance of this, and I have heard from a few of you who are doing some interesting work. I know we have a brand new affiliate who in North Carolina who shifts from focus area to focus area each year, and this year they will give only in the environment. So that was a model that I hadn't heard very much about before, that you might give 1 year in education and give the next year in the environment and a third year in some kind of health and human services emphasis. One of the things that 99 Girlfriends is giving to now is housing stability. And certainly there's an intersection between certain aspects of environmental giving and people living in healthy homes. Okay, questions. Would love to hear more about how women's giving circles view themselves and their power to save the planet. How is this discussed among the groups, and what draws members into this work? So again, this seems like a question that any of us might answer. Do people see their giving circles as having the power to contribute to solving this like very big and very urgent problem? To take us all the way back to Jane Fonda. How are folks tackling this? Or even just like, how are you thinking about this, even if you're not giving significantly in this area right now? Just taking a look at the chat. Kathleen is asking, like, are there any creative collaborations that have been successful? And Shreya, maybe you have an example from the ways that the Catalyst Award intersects with the other kinds of giving that exist at Rachel's network, because I know the Catalyst Award is just one of the things that you do. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your co-funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, Fern is here, the Rachel's Network president, and I actually invite her to also share in the chat. So yes, we fundraise for the Catalyst Award from our membership, but then also to go to external funders, places like this, Giving Circles. But after the Catalyst awardees are announced, I work with our director of programming, and we actually have these series of catalyzing conversations, is what they're called, where we showcase the Catalyst awardee, usually in conversation with another awardee or with a member, and they get to really talk about their work, their organization, what drives them, what brings them joy, where the urgency is, where the funding needs are. And often what ends up happening is our members end up giving directly to the Catalyst awardee and their organization. We've also had some really beautiful co-funding initiatives in the past. I know last year, sort of right before my time there, but there was more of an effort to give to Black women-led organizations. So there was a Black Femme and campaign that members could give to. Then that was a big collective giving effort last year. And then there have been other times when, we've had, for example, right now there's a collective funding effort going on as well in West Virginia. So there's been more of these like niche, smaller collective funding efforts, again, all around the environment, and we try to have them be more regional, or like in the case of the Black Femme leadership, really, again, trying to write an imbalance in the funding landscape that we had noticed. To go back to the question from the attendee around women's giving circles themselves, one thing that I think that I didn't explicitly say, but that definitely came up, is that, part of the reason we were focused on and are focused on women's leadership is for me, it's because women and girls often feel the impacts of a lot of these issues more, right? And sort of this disproportionate burden again, because of intersectionality between like the gender and race and look and zip code and all these other statuses, they tend to be feeling the burden of the environmental challenges more. And so this just feels like a way to help right that disparity. And that this is sort of separate, but we also have a C4 at Rachel's network. And one of the reports that actually just came out, the Rachel's Action Network director, Erica, had put together, showed that women of color tend to have better environmental voting records in Congress. So again, we're seeing this connection between women's leadership and better environmental outcomes.
Great, thanks so much for sharing that. And I see some comments in the chat also. Fern says that the Catalyst Award has been your most successful co-funding effort to date. We've got like 3 or 4 more minutes to take your questions before we close. Any other? Okay, fantastic. More links and resources for you in the chat. I think we're all going to need like a reading day after this powerful webinar hour. So I really appreciate, Shreya, all the great new information and inspiration that you're offering. I also just did want to like double down on your recommendation that folks check out Adrienne Marie Brown's work, because in terms of like collective action and collective decision making, she's a really great resource, both in terms of, I would say for myself as a facilitator, like philosophically and practically. I've really learned a lot from reading her work. Their work. I'm not sure what pronouns, Adrienne.
I think interchangeable. I did look that up. So
thank you. Thank you for supporting my learning. All right. Here we go. Thank you all very much for coming. I know we had almost 50 people registered for this webinar, and a little more than half of those folks were able to show up live. So I really appreciate everyone's engagement, and you can see here on the screen our upcoming events. Sandy spoke a little bit about the May webinar, which instead of having a topic that like this one or expertise from different affiliates, we're actually going to give an overview of Philanos, the organization, and welcome the board, whose term starts on July 1st. And I'm super excited that Ilyasa Shabazz is going to join us from Philanthropy Together. If you haven't had a chance to look at the new report that just came out on April 2nd, that's a great opportunity to get some highlights. And we will have Tech Talk for those of you who are supporting that aspect of your Giving Circles work, the membership roundtable, and the Comms Club also coming up in May. So thanks a bunch to Nancy, to Dale behind the scenes, to Shreya. It's been such a pleasure to work with you, and I hope we'll have a chance to do it again. And to all of you who were here. It's about 5 minutes to the hour. Please do take our quick webinar survey. Please do take Nancy's invitation to email her about your the environmental grants that you do give or have given. And Shreya, I'm going to turn to you and ask you if you want to say any last words before we close.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for, I know time is our most precious resource, for thank you for showing up and giving us your full attention today, and deeply appreciate all the work that you all do and fund.